Tu la cangre, Kool-Aid, respect, street love. Te amo, te calle, Daddy Yankee. With in numerous interviews, Bad Bunny has called his favorite artist, definitely one of my favorite artists of all times, Julio Voltio. Para mi hermana Kool-Aid, de corazón a fuego, Julio Voltio, and he gave me this at Via Kennedy in 2005 in Puerto Rico. I was up this morning and I caught myself in an extreme moment on this journey of remembering who I am and what I'm capable and what I've done after being a mom, after being a caregiver and coming back. This morning was a real reality check. I saw a bunch of blogs and interviews saying how important it is that Bad Bunny always represents where the music came from, where the culture came from. And a lot of people are saying, like, oh, they hope he brings out Tego. They hope he brings out Tego, which I do too. Tego was always just one of my top dogs. Part of the reason that I loved Julio Voltio so much was because Tego was such an advocate of Julio Voltio. And to really sit back and think about where the movement was then when I was a young girl, and I can remember shouts out to Gus Lopez, being a part of that was so magical. I had a show I was hosting on Mundos, which was an off spin from Telemundo. It was their young Chase. And they wanted me to be the West Coast correspondent. And I can remember representing all of our artists and bringing Baby Bash out to Miami and bringing Little Rob out to Miami. And at first I was like, man, they're playing more of the reggaeton. And then I started really listening and becoming close friends with DJ Casanova, whose show we syndicated on the radio, which was Suvalo, which was a big part of taking the reggaeton movement to the next level. I just can remember listening to these artists and getting it, being like hearing Yankee's voice, hearing Tego's voice, Voltio, and realizing that this was the voice of the streets of Puerto Rico that needed to be heard. And being a part of it was so special. And the one thing that I did notice that I loved about PR at that time, which it was not an easy feat because Gus Lopez and Elias from White Lion, they dealt with a lot of character and a lot of personality to help orchestrate and bring everybody together and keep everybody together and keep everybody moving. But the one thing PR did, the one thing the island did, no matter what beefs they had, no matter what situations, they moved strong, they moved as a movement. And now the island's taking over the stage of the Super Bowl. And just to think about all of that, I'm mind blown. But you have the people who had to do the original seeding work. That I love Bad Bunny, the fact that he gives props to his favorite artists like Voltio, and that he gives props to Tego, and I hope he does today at the Super Bowl with one of them. I can remember Tego coming into the radio station at Power 106, and it was the first time I ever brought one of my artists that I loved into one of the Power 106 mixer meetings. A mixer meeting was when all the DJs would come together and decide what records they were going to break. And you've got to remember, at that time, there wasn't the internet. You didn't have as much. I mean, that was the space. Radio in different local markets was the space. You broke your records, you broke the news, you broke artists. It was a total different time. And I can remember being so nervous because here I already was representing the music I had been representing from the West Coast street culture. And then now I'm bringing in this whole new wave. And Tego goes in with me. He walks in the room, and I didn't understand it then, but I understood it now. And he said, fuck this, Kool-Aid. That was the only thing I understood. Then spoke in Spanish, grabbed my hand, and walked out of the meeting with me. And he said, we don't need anybody but the streets. We don't need anybody but the streets. And that was my journey to go to PR. And they brought me to Via Kennedy. I remember the baseball field next to Via Kennedy and seeing even how different the style they played baseball was and side arming it and feeling that culture. and knowing at that moment that such a voice was coming out. I really started reflecting and thinking about where a lot of those artists that seeded this movement are. And, you know, you've got your Julio Voltio, you've got your Daddy Yankee, you've got your Hector El Bambino, and they've all leaned into God. And you've got your Bad Bunny, who obviously leans into God, leans into justice, leans into freedom. And that's one of the most beautiful things about the Latin culture. And I hope that my community here on the West Coast will take note of that, because I think that's the only, I think it's going to be even more over the top once that army comes through as a unison movement, as a unified movement. And that's what did it for PR, was the unified movement of the people of PR, but for the whole entire culture. So I know this is kind of long, but it was just super reflective to think about what came before Bad Bunny. Voltio, para mi hermana, la corazón a fuego. Julio Voltio, 2005. I've been there and I've watched it. And I knew all the Latino voice needed to do was be heard. And now it's not just about being heard, it's so much bigger. It's about setting the trend for what our world's going to become, based on your roots, based on your different heritages, based on your different cultural beliefs, and most of all, based on family and love, which is the main backbone. And I'm just glad I could be a part of the early days. So for now, PR, vamos por la calle. If you know, you know. Que pao, let's rock it, son.